haphazardly. I'm Wes, and in this video I'll be transforming a Reaper Purple Worm into the Grave Robber Boor. This will be the first of several videos as I build a dice tower / interactive terrain piece for the game Idols of Torment. If you're not familiar with this, get over to Black Magic Craft and check out Jeremy's skills. You'll be inspired as I am. I'd also like to take a little time to thank Nightmare Landscapes for sponsoring this video, supplying paints, washes, basing material, and 3D prints for this video and videos to follow as I build this interactive piece. I'd also like to thank you who are watching. If you watched my first video and came back, thank you. If you're watching this one, I hope you enjoy it and you continue to watch. And now, without further ado, the Grave Robber Boor. So here's a Reaper Purple Worm. I'm well aware of the hatred some in our hobby have towards metal minis. Details not as crisp as other materials, gluing and repairs can be a problem, and weight is a factor. But for me, and maybe it's just nostalgia, I'll never fully abandon metal models. The cleanup and prep of a metal model is basically the same and you use basically the same tools. While there was some heavy cleanup and prep to do, overall this is a crisp, clean, highly detailed sculpt. With the cleanup and prep complete, it was time to move on to the sculpting. I grabbed my epoxy sculpt and began to add the boils, scars, and wounds that would transform the Reaper Purple Worm into the Grave Robber Boor. I took my time and was patient during this process. I experimented a lot with switching back and forth from metal to silicone tools to get the desired effect that I was looking for. I didn't want the additions to stick out like an afterthought, so I paid particular attention to the original sculpt, blending and matching the existing features. During the process, I was sure to keep my tools damp and used water 95% of the time, while occasionally using my skin oil as a lubricant. After a point, I could no longer sculpt without risking smashing an already sculpted area, so after letting it cure, I resumed using epoxy sculpt and a Milliput blend. The coloration difference helped me keep track of new work versus old. All in all, I feel the additional sculpting came out good and conveys the feeling of putrid, rotting, grotesque skin that I had pictured on the Grave Robber Boor. Once the pieces had cured, it was time to base them. I sanded the bottoms of the models and the bases. I used the slow set adhesive in the center and ringed it with dots of superglue. I used bits of foam and some leftover epoxy sculpt to add debris. I put the stinger on such a large base, thinking that in combat, it would have a large attack radius and cause a lot of collateral damage to the surrounding terrain. This would require PCs not only to combat the tail, but also negotiate the hazardous conditions caused by the upheaval of the earth around them. Alright, primed and ready to go. As I approached this paint job, I had only these thoughts in mind. Dark, evil, gross, and violent. I'd like to say that I had a great grand paint scheme in mind, but that's not the case. I had a mental image of how the Grave Robber Boor should look, and how the Idols of Torment dice tower / terrain piece is going to look, but it's not a full image, and it evolves constantly. All I know for sure is that the Echo is a desolate, forlorn place. The darkness and despair are overwhelming and all-consuming. Anything that calls the Echo its home cannot be good. So I set about my journey by starting with Nightmare Landscapes Foggy Mist White, thin, painted on haphazardly, and then stained with dried blood red wash. This gave me a nice sickly pink skin tone to start with. Since Nightmare Landscapes is a young company, they have no yellow yet, so I opted for Reaper Ogre Skin. I mixed Ogre Skin and Nightmare Brown, varying the tone and tinting it towards the red spectrum and then sometimes green. I was totally reacting to what the paint was doing, helping guide me in a direction that I wasn't sure where I was heading. When things were looking a bit too bright, Nightmare Black and Haunted Tree Brown washes combined nicely to darken down and get that gritty feel back. Not that I could, but I wasn't going for a golden demon flashy paint job. The Grave Robber is a disgusting, vile, and disturbing creature, and so is the place that it inhabits. I wanted to reflect that in this paint scheme. A myriad of colors, but subdued and dirty feeling. Something that, if you saw it in real life, would repulse and terrify. As I played with these paints and experimented with where I was going, I constantly mentally referred to John Carpenter's The Thing and the prequel. The Thing would definitely live in the Echo, and the Grave Robber Boor, in my mind, is akin to that creature. I dry brushed some of the areas with Nightmare Green, Ogre Skin, Nightmare Brown, and mixes of the three. Nightmare Red and Midnight Flesh made a dark, rich purple for all the boils, wounds, and scars. I played with the tones and saturations on all these as well. Like I'd mentioned, I'd had this vague blueprint to follow, and while pushing and pulling these Nightmare landscape paints around the model, the pieces fell into place. I don't know if you'd call it irony or poetry, that these are the paints I'm using to create a Nightmare landscape, and a Nightmare creature that lives within that landscape. Since I'm not really sure on what the terrain is exactly going to look like in the end product, I just simply mixed up a mess on my wet palette and slapped a coat on top the primer for now. And there you have it. The Grave Robber Boor. Coming to a nightmare near you. Again, I'd like to thank Joe and the gang at Nightmare Landscapes for sponsoring this video. and Jeremy at Black Magic Craft for inspiring me to not only embark on this journey to build an interactive terrain piece for his awesome game Idols of Torment, but also to join the adventure of a YouTube channel. And thanks to all of you who watch, like, share, and subscribe. I really do appreciate it. Until next time, I'm Wes, and this is Wizardry.